I took my daughter-in-law to her prenatal checkup at my husband's clinic. He told me he would pay for the tests they had ordered. When I returned to the waiting room, an unknown woman sitting next to me whispered in my ear, "What relationship do you have with the doctor?" I replied, "He's my husband." She frowned. "Are you sure the baby your daughter-in-law is expecting is really your grandson?" I had just heard her call him my love. But before I continue, check if you've already subscribed. Subscribe to the channel and share in the comments where you're watching us from. I'd love to know how far our revenge stories reach. The soft sound of the engine mingled with the classical music playing on the radio, but I hardly paid it any attention. All my focus was on my daughter-in-law, sitting in the passenger seat. Camilla was caressing her slightly bulging belly with tenderness. She frowned slightly and turned to me with a complaining voice. "Mom, I couldn't sleep again last night. I was nauseous all night. I feel exhausted." "We'll go straight to Dad's office later." "Yes, I don't want to go to a big hospital." I was a little surprised. I had suggested a highly regarded gynecological clinic with a top-level team of specialists and the most modern equipment, but she had categorically refused. "Why, daughter? Wouldn't it be better to go to a big hospital?" Camilla shook her head, leaning back in the seat with absolute confidence. "I trust Dad and you more. Family is more reliable. He'll take care of the baby better than anyone." It made sense. After all, family always inspires more confidence. I didn't think about it anymore and drove toward Archero's private practice, my husband. The waiting room was quite crowded. You could hear children crying and shouting, the television blaring morning news, adults speaking in low voices, and that familiar smell of disinfectant, the same one that had clung to Archero for the last 40 years. At that moment, the office door opened. Archero came out wearing his immaculate white coat, looking as serene and reliable as always. He didn't smile, but for some reason his smile seemed less than genuine, somewhat forced. His gaze lingered on me for a moment, then focused on Camilla. "How are you feeling?" He gently took her arm, speaking to her with unusual tenderness. He asked in detail about her health, her nausea, her diet, but he barely looked me in the eyes, not even for a second. The attention he gave my daughter-in-law comforted me, but the way he avoided my gaze left a strange feeling of emptiness. He soon turned to me and held out his leather wallet. "Elena, can you go down to reception to pay for the girls' tests? Use my card." "Sure," I nodded. I took the wallet and felt a little sadness for not having had more time to talk to him. He hurried to take Camilla into the office. When I returned after making the payment, the dark wooden door was already closed. Camilla had gone in with Archero. I sighed and looked for an empty seat. There was only one chair next to a young pregnant woman who looked pale and exhausted. While waiting, a magazine fell from her lap to the floor. I bent down to pick it up for her. She smiled at me in thanks. That smile eased the tiredness from her face a little, and we started chatting. She introduced herself as Lucia Ortega. We talked about how hot the day was and the boring cooking show playing on the television. Lucia was a very nice girl. "Are you here for a consultation too?" she asked. I let out a laugh filled with pride and joy. "No, I came to accompany my daughter-in-law. I'm about to become a grandmother." Upon hearing that, Lucia suddenly fell silent. Her smile disappeared completely. Her gaze fixed on the closed office door where my husband and daughter-in-law were. Her expression turned complex, a mixture of doubt and compassion. That sudden change puzzled me. Then she leaned toward me, lowering her voice to almost a whisper, and covered her mouth with her hand as if afraid an invisible force might hear us. "Dr. Archero, he's your husband, and the woman who is sitting with you." Her voice trembled, a little flustered. Curious about the girl's unusual behavior, I still replied politely. "Yes, he's my husband, and the girl is my daughter-in-law." Lucia furrowed her thin eyebrows. She looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned back toward my ear. This time her voice was even lower, but each word cut like a cold blade straight to my heart. "Are you sure the baby she's carrying in her womb is really your grandson?" Just a moment ago, when I left, I saw your daughter-in-law. She called him my love. Those two intimate words struck my soul like lightning. My ears rang. My world shattered into pieces. The paper coffee cup, still warm, slipped from my hands. The brown liquid spilled across the cold floor, as if my happiness had just been extinguished by the blow. But I felt nothing anymore. I remained paralyzed, eyes fixed on the wooden door in front of me. In the midst of the daze, memories began returning suddenly, without order, like old, broken films hastily projected onto my mind. I saw myself, Maria Elena Castaneda, a retired literature teacher, a woman who had lived among books in the small garden behind the house. My life had been like a calm novel with perfectly ordered chapters, an exemplary husband, a loving son, and a peaceful future awaiting the first grandchild. And then there was Archero, my husband. Not the Archero in the white coat with the forced smile, but the Archero of the last 40 years. The man the whole neighborhood respected for his calmness, integrity, and dedication. I saw him in his study every night under the warm light, gray hair illuminated, glasses slipped down his nose while he read thick medical books intently. That image, as familiar and steady as a lighthouse, had been a symbol of absolute peace in my heart. How could a man like that? Mauricio, our only son, 34 years old, quiet and reserved like his father. He hadn't followed Archero into medicine, but had taken refuge in the world of letters, writing detective stories. Mauricio was a good boy, a little naive in matters of love, with an artist's soul who saw life through romantic eyes. Suddenly the memories stopped on a day a few months ago. The day Mauricio returned home pale, bloodless, fists clenched, voice trembling. "Dad, Mom, Camilla is pregnant." He swallowed hard. "It was a mistake. At Marco's birthday party I drank too much. I have to take responsibility." At that moment Camilla hid behind my son, shoulders trembling, crying inconsolably, head down, hugging her belly. So fragile, so small, so vulnerable. I had known Camilla for some time. She was Mauricio's friend. I never imagined their relationship had gone that far. But seeing her tears, seeing my son's confused and guilty face, my maternal instinct awoke. I didn't hesitate. I hugged them both, tears of emotion running down my face. "It's okay. Nothing's wrong. This is destiny, a blessing for our family." But now, rewinding that scene in my head, I noticed a strange detail. Archero's reaction that day had been dense, terrifying silence. He hadn't said a word, hadn't smiled, not even out of courtesy. He simply gave Mauricio a very light pat on the shoulder, almost as if nothing had happened, and turned away in silence, slamming the door to his office. At the time, I naively thought he was in shock, unprepared to become a grandfather so suddenly. And then other pieces began to fit together clearly. One night, while I happily served food to Mauricio and Camilla, she naturally used her own chopsticks to take a piece of stewed meat from Archero's bowl. "Try this, Dad, it's delicious," she said with a wide smile that held no distance at all. Archero was so startled he almost choked on his rice. He coughed several times, face flushed, and quickly drank a large gulp of water. I thought the girl was just being kind, but now I saw that gesture as blatant territorial marking. I remembered the times Camilla prepared coffee and brought it to Archero's office. Every time, my husband thanked her, but his eyes never left the computer screen. He never looked at her directly. I used to interpret that as adult seriousness. Now it seemed like the discomfort of someone guilty. And that strange new habit, our bedroom for 40 years of marriage, had never been locked, not even when changing clothes. It was a space of absolute trust. But ever since Camilla moved in with us, Archero started locking the door every time he entered the room alone at night, especially when she was wandering nearby. I remembered once knocking to ask for a jar of ointment and having to wait quite a while until he came out, forehead sweaty, breathing heavily. He hurriedly explained he was doing exercises. There was also the casual comment from Doña Remedios, our neighbor. One morning, while I watered my cactus pots, she leaned close and whispered, "Listen, Elena, the other night I couldn't sleep and went out on the balcony for air." I saw Dr. Archero's car leaving the house, and I also saw his daughter-in-law in the passenger seat. I'm sure she felt pregnancy discomfort and they went to buy medicine, right? Poor thing. At the time, I just smiled and nodded, even feeling touched that my husband was so attentive to his daughter-in-law. All those loose memories, all those details I had strived to justify in 1,000 ways, those signs I had denied because of my age and paranoia. Now, after Lucia's whisper, everything connected invisibly. They were no longer disordered pieces. They formed a dreadful, painfully clear picture. I remained motionless in the cold plastic waiting room chair, a chill running down my spine, seeping into every fiber of my body. A cold that didn't come from the air conditioning, but from the brutal truth that had just been revealed. I knew that from that moment on, the peaceful novel of my life had been torn to shreds. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Lucia's worried voice brought me back to reality, but it sounded far away. I stayed glued to the chair, gaze lost in the coffee stain drying beneath my feet, scattered like a scar on the white floor. I wanted to answer the kind girl, to say I was fine, but my throat was dry. I couldn't utter a word. All the strength inside me seemed to have vanished. At that moment, a sharp click came from the wooden door. That small sound, at that precise moment, was like a whip jolting me out of my lethargy. Reason struck me awake. I lifted my head. My heart began beating again, wild, racing beats inside my chest. Archero came out first, removing light blue medical gloves with a slight bewilderment he couldn't hide. He raised his voice more than usual, as if trying to calm the entire waiting room, or perhaps himself. "Everything is fine. There's nothing to worry about. Mother and baby are healthy." Camilla came out right behind him, the complete opposite. Her cheeks flushed radiant, eyes shining with indescribable joy she made no attempt to hide. She walked close behind him, and when he stopped to speak to a nurse, she did something that chilled my blood. She reached out and placed her hand on his shoulder. It wasn't a friendly daughter-in-law pat. Her long fingers lingered, gently brushing the white fabric provocatively. She leaned in and whispered something only the two of them could hear. I couldn't make it out, but I clearly saw Archero tense instantly. His shoulders trembled slightly. Right then our eyes met. He jumped as if electrocuted. Bewilderment turned to panic. He cleared his throat nervously and discreetly shifted, removing Camilla's hand from his shoulder with a subtle but firm gesture. It was then that Camilla saw me. The girl was a formidable actress. In the blink of an eye, the tenderness and complicity she had shown Archero vanished, replaced by the face of an attentive, affectionate daughter-in-law. She ran toward me with a sweet voice. "Mom, did you wait long? Sorry, Dad was checking on the grandson." The words "dad" and "grandson" felt like needles in my ears. I said nothing. I just stared at Archero with a cold, demanding gaze. My husband, the man I had been married to for 40 years, couldn't look me in the eyes for the first time in his life. He hastily focused on papers inside a folder, voice monotonous, fake, pathetic. "Here are the ultrasound results. Don't forget the vitamins." Camilla took the blackened white image with obvious joy and showed it to me like a trophy. "Look, Mom, Mauricio's baby. Thank God, he looks so healthy." I forced myself to look at the blurry image where a small creature was forming, but my mind was elsewhere. In the midst of the chaos, a thought struck like lightning. I needed proof, irrefutable proof. I looked down at the coffee stain on the floor and pretended to be flustered. "Oh, sorry, how clumsy of me. Camilla, can you go to the bathroom and get me some napkins? I think there's a roll." "Yes, of course. I'll be right back," she answered without hesitation and left. Archero, uncomfortable, suggested, "Let me call cleaning. Sit down." "No need," I replied curtly, eyes fixed on the ultrasound. Taking advantage of the brief moment when no one was paying attention, and while Archero spoke to someone, I quickly glanced at the top corner of the image. My aging eyes suddenly sharpened. Printed in tiny letters. Estimated gestational age, 12 weeks and 4 days. 12 weeks and 4 days. My heart stopped for a second. Marco's birthday party, The fateful night Mauricio got drunk and confessed his mistake had been exactly 8 weeks ago. I remembered perfectly because our next wedding anniversary was exactly 8 weeks and 2 days later. The difference was more than 4 weeks. I may be a literature teacher who knows little about medicine, but I know how to do math, and math never lies. That baby could not be Mauricio's son. The thought hit like a hammer, painful but crystal clear. Right then, Camilla returned with the roll of paper. I hurried to hand back the ultrasound, forcing a smile that felt twisted and repulsive on my own face. He's gorgeous. He looks just like Mauricio when he was a baby. The lie came frighteningly easily. Perhaps a mother's instinct to protect her child can turn even a kind person cold and surprisingly good at pretending. All the way home, Camilla wouldn't stop talking, excitedly listing baby names: Mateo if a boy, Isabella if a girl, colors for the nursery, shops for clothes. I only answered with soulless ahas and yes, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, gaze fixed on the road as if that were the only way not to collapse. When we entered the garage, I turned off the engine. In the suffocating silence, only the cooling engine could be heard. Camilla had already gone inside, but I stayed seated a long time, staring into space, breathing with difficulty. That dinner felt heavy as lead. The air in the dining room was so dense I felt I needed a knife to cut it. I served Mauricio his favorite chicken and mushroom soup, but the familiar aroma only turned my stomach. Only my son seemed oblivious to the silent storm brewing. He spoke animatedly about his new book and ideas. He even lovingly served Camilla a chicken thigh, telling her she had to eat well for the baby. "Eat, my love. Mom makes it delicious. You have to feed both of you." Camilla smiled radiantly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. When Mauricio bent his head, I saw her glance sideways at Arturo, a meaningful, challenging look, almost a signal. And Arturo said not a word. Throughout dinner, he kept his gaze fixed on his plate, eating mechanically. His silence was more chilling than any confession. Until, as if breaking the last thread holding him together, he dropped his fork. The sharp metallic sound against tile cut Mauricio's conversation short. We all jumped. He hurriedly picked it up, face red with embarrassment. I watched everything: Camilla's gaze, Arturo's nervous reaction. My soul froze. That dinner was no longer a family meal. It was a silent trial, and I was the only judge who knew the crime. When we finished, Mauricio kissed his wife on the forehead and went to his study to continue writing in his world of words. Camilla yawned, said she was tired and wanted an early bath. When I heard the water running, I knew the moment had come. I slowly entered the bedroom we shared. Arturo had his back to the window, wide open, a thin cloud of smoke rising into the night. He was smoking, a habit he had quit over 20 years ago, the day Mauricio graduated from university. Resuming it now could only mean one thing: his conscience was in chaos. I didn't mince words. I approached the vanity and placed my phone on the surface, screen still on, showing the secret photo I had taken of the ultrasound. 12 weeks and 4 days, I said, voice eerily calm, as if reading the weather forecast. Marco's birthday party was exactly 8 weeks ago. Explain that to me, Arturo. He jumped. The cigarette fell onto the Persian carpet, scattering small embers. He clumsily stepped on them to extinguish them, like a child caught doing something wrong. Maybe the ultrasound has a margin of error. You know, medicine sometimes, he stammered, unable to look at me. Don't lie to me, I interrupted, voice still even but deadly cold. You're a doctor. You know a 4-week margin of error is absurd. Tell me the truth, Arturo. That baby is Mauricio, is it? Silence filled the room. Arturo stopped trying to justify himself. He lowered his head, broad shoulders slumping as if an invisible weight had been lifted, only to reveal the truth beneath. Finally, he nodded slowly, confessing everything. He let out a deep, melancholic sigh and slumped onto the edge of the bed, hands in his gray hair. Then he began a carefully prepared script to mitigate his guilt. I know, he said in a raspy voice. Camilla confessed to me. She had made a mistake with another man before, but the guy abandoned her as soon as he knew she was pregnant. She was terrified and clung to Mauricio like a lifeline. I didn't have the courage to tell the truth. How could I break the boy's heart? I just wanted to protect my family. He looked at me with pleading, tear-soaked eyes, trying to play the selfless father and virtuous husband, carrying the terrible secret alone to preserve peace. But I was no longer yesterday's naive Alina. I looked him straight in the eyes without hesitation. Protect the family, or protect yourself, Arturo. Today in the clinic I heard it. I saw it. A young woman sitting next to me heard my daughter-in-law call my husband my love. Arturo's face turned white as paper. His lips moved but produced no sound. Every attempt at dignity vanished. His shoulders collapsed completely, and he cried, desperate, drowned tears of an old man stripped naked by his lies. The most horrible truth finally emerged. He confessed everything. The clandestine relationship that began with Camilla's visits to the house, supposedly to see Mauricio, but really targeting him. The weakness of an older man before the calculated seduction of a young woman. He claimed he had tried to end it, but Camilla threatened him with the baby, saying it was his and that if he refused, she would reveal everything and destroy his 40-year reputation. But the most appalling part was yet to come. He admitted he had been an accomplice in Camilla's plan. On the night of Marco's party, he was the one who, feigning concern, convinced Mauricio to drink more. Then he dragged his own unconscious son to the room where Camilla waited. But I swear, Alina, he said, crawling to my feet, the boy was deeply asleep. He couldn't do anything. I just wanted to create a false scene. I swear to God. He knelt on the floor, hugging my legs, crying with snot and tears. But in that moment, I felt only cold repulsion rising in my chest. Slowly but firmly, I pulled his hands away and stepped back, creating an unbridgeable distance. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. In truth, I hadn't slept. I had lain all night with my back to Arturo, listening to each of his breaths, the sound that for 40 years had been the melody that lulled me to sleep now unbearable and fake. At dawn, I got up silently. I put on my role of wife and mother-in-law as usual, went to the kitchen, fried eggs, made coffee, cut watermelon into perfect squares. The aroma of Arabica coffee filled the house, the smell I once loved now only bitter in my throat and stomach. Arturo looked down, eyes swollen and red. He gave me pleading, pathetic looks. I didn't respond, only placed his plate of eggs in front of him with a sharp blow. Soon Mauricio and Camilla came down. My son still had the sleepy face of a writer who works late, but Camilla was fresh as a newly opened flower, unaware of the drama that had unfolded in our room the night before. She continued her act, even becoming affectionate with Arturo. "Daddy, will you peel an apple for me? You're the best at it." Arturo jumped, awkwardly taking the apple and knife. I watched the scene while gripping the butter knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had to make a superhuman effort to keep my face neutral, to not scream or overturn the table of appearances. After that infernal breakfast, Arturo hurried to the clinic as if fleeing. I couldn't stand his face another second either. Mauricio had a publisher appointment and left soon after. Camilla turned to me with a sweet smile. "Mommy, I'm going out with friends to shop for maternity clothes. I won't be long." She even blew me a kiss before leaving. The front door closed. The house returned to silence, not peaceful, but the silence of a stage after the actors have gone to the dressing rooms, leaving only me and the rotten secrets. This was the moment. I breathed deeply and climbed the stairs to Mauricio and Camilla's room. The sweet, cloying perfume hit me as soon as I opened the door, her scent as artificial as her personality. I began tidying as an excuse to clean, changed the sheets, dusted the vanity full of expensive makeup. My eyes scanned the room like a predator's, searching for any crack in her perfect facade. My maternal instinct told me to check the most intimate places. I flung open the closet, nothing, pulled every drawer, nothing. Frustration grew. Maybe the cunning girl had hidden everything too well, or I was simply paranoid. Finally, I lifted Camilla's pillow to dust it, an almost automatic gesture. But I felt something hard inside, a protrusion that wasn't stuffing. My heart began pounding so hard, I could hear it in my chest. With trembling hands, I opened the pillowcase, reached in, and touched a leather cover. I pulled out a small dark brown leather notebook, the kind used for work plans. It looked ordinary, but I knew an abyss lay hidden beneath. I sat on the edge of the bed and began to read Camilla's neat, stylized handwriting. What it contained was chilling. It wasn't a diary. It was a detailed plan to commit a crime. Stage 1, approach Archero. Looks respectable but deep down lonely. Old wife, withered son. Just needs a little admiration, a hint of youth. Easy. Breaking point, get pregnant, perfect. But he wants to end it. Coward. Who does he think he is? Plan B, switch target to Mauricio, the good-natured fool. One night of drinks is enough. Join the Castaneda family through the front door. Stay close to Archero. Keep enjoying everything. Things to do. Force Archero to stay silent with the secret photos I took. No problem. And Maria Elena is so stupid that with a few crocodile tears, she'll believe everything. When I read Maria Elena is so stupid, my hand trembled. Blood rushed to my head. I felt dizzy, on the verge of fainting. She had seen me as a puppet, a pathetic old woman in her theater of lies. Risk, if Archero opposes, release the romance photos, reveal the child is his, destroy his 40-year reputation. He won't dare. Upon reading the last line, the dizziness vanished, replaced by frozen rage. But reason held me steady. I took a deep breath, forced calm, and with utmost care photographed every page, each word, as clearly as possible. When finished, I returned the notebook exactly where I found it, smoothed the pillow, and left the room. I had my weapon. All afternoon, I sat motionless in the living room armchair, the one Archero gave me for our 30th anniversary. Not even its comfort could calm the storm inside me. I stared at the photos on my phone, those beautiful letters full of poison. Her plan was perfect, cruel, every step calculated. But the notebook alone wasn't enough. She was too cunning. If I showed it, she would cry, scream I was slandering her because I hated her for giving the Castanedas a grandchild, that I had invented everything to separate her from her husband, that Archero lied to avoid recognizing his own son. In a war of tears and lies, an old woman probably wouldn't win. I needed cold, scientific, undeniable proof. I needed a DNA test. Immediately a name came to mind. Claudia, the nurse assistant at Archero's clinic, someone I considered a niece. I called her. "Hello, Aunt Elena." Her voice was cheerful. "Claudia, it's me. Are you leaving work? I have a personal matter. Can we meet at the corner cafeteria?" "Of course. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The cafeteria was discreet, hidden behind bougainvillea, perfect. Claudia arrived with her usual radiant smile and playful braid. She immediately asked about Camilla and baby preparations. Seeing the innocence in her face, I felt something break inside me. I was about to drag a good soul into my family's mire. I took her small hand and squeezed it gently. My voice was serious. "Claudia, first I owe you an apology. What I'm about to ask goes against your professional principles, but I have no one else I trust." Her eyes showed surprise and concern. I told her enough of the truth for her to understand, without exposing Archero's full shame. "At the next prenatal checkup, Camilla will have blood tests. Once you've taken what the hospital needs, secretly keep one small tube for me. Just one. Can you do it?" Claudia froze. I saw the conflict in her eyes, losing her job, her license. But then she saw my pleading eyes and the deep wrinkles of worry. After a long silence, she nodded firmly. "I owe you, Aunt. I'll help you. Trust me." Relief washed over me. I thanked her with tears in my eyes. That night, after making sure everyone was asleep, I entered Archero's office under the pretext of looking for a book. His hairbrush lay on the desk. I carefully collected several gray hairs. Then I tiptoed into Mauricio's room. He had fallen asleep at his desk. From the pillow he hugged while writing, I collected several black hairs. Back in my room, I placed each sample in separate Ziploc bags, labeled Arturo and Mauricio, then hid them at the bottom of my underwear drawer, the safest place. Everything was ready. The trap was set. All that remained was to wait for the next checkup, Claudia's signal, and for science to pronounce the final truth. The 2 weeks that followed felt like a century. Every day at home, I was actress and director, forcing myself to play the caring mother-in-law and excited grandmother, cooking nutritious meals, making her drink milk, knitting tiny white wool booties, while my hands trembled with each stitch, weaving a web of deception until the moment to spring the real trap. Arturo walked like a shadow, buying me gifts, roses, my favorite cakes, trying to start conversations. I answered with silence or cold, brief phrases. 40 years of love reduced to ashes in one night. Then one morning my phone vibrated gently. Claudia's message. I have what you need. Left it in a small box in your mailbox, wrapped well. My heart raced. I casually went out as if picking up the Daily Mail. Inside the mailbox, beside Bill's, was an old eyeglass case, heavier than expected. Back inside, door locked, hands trembling, I opened it. Inside, wrapped in thick cotton, was a small test tube of dark red liquid, Camilla's blood, the crucial key to my battle. I couldn't risk a local lab. Arturo had too many contacts. The next morning, I told the family I was visiting an old friend in Toluca. No one suspected. In the passenger seat lay a small refrigerated box with the 3 samples. I chose a discreet private center with excellent reviews for precision and confidentiality. I registered under a false name, Rosa Morales, for non-invasive prenatal paternity testing. The counselor asked the relationship I needed to verify. I forced the lie through my tight throat. I want to confirm the paternity of my grandson between my son-in-law and another man. I paid cash, asked results be sent only to my personal email. Those 10 days were the longest of my life. Every email notification made my heart leap. Then it arrived. While watering my cacti, trying to find peace, my phone vibrated. Result of genetic analysis, file 734B. Hands covered in dirt and sweat, I rushed inside, sat at the dining table, and opened the PDF with shaking fingers. A table of complex terms and graphs I didn't understand. I scrolled straight to the conclusion. First line, fetal sample compared to alleged father Mauricio Morales, 0% compatibility. Biological relationship excluded. I expected that. But the next line made the world spin. Fetal sample compared to alleged second father Arturo Morales, 0% compatibility. Biological relationship excluded. I read it 3 times, rubbed my eyes, read again. It wasn't possible. 0%. It wasn't Arturo's child either. Camilla hadn't only deceived my son, she had deceived my husband too. She was pregnant by a complete stranger and had used that pregnancy to manipulate both father and son, turning them into puppets in a disgusting tragedy. Suddenly I laughed, a dry, bitter, deranged laugh echoing in the empty kitchen. I laughed at my son's naivety, my husband's weakness, and at myself for almost falling completely into that vixen's trap. She had planned every detail, except one. Science doesn't lie. Now I had everything, an unbreakable chain of proof. It was time to bring down the curtain on this farce. I chose the moment precisely. I knew Mauricio had a late editorial meeting and Arturo a monthly medical club dinner. The stage would be just Camilla and me, 2 women face to face. I prepared chamomile tea. The gentle aroma kept me calm and called her down. Camilla, come to the living room for a moment. I want to talk about decorating the baby's room. She came down with a glass of warm milk, still wearing her innocent angel mask, and began excitedly describing mint green walls and an oak European crib. I let her speak, letting her lose herself one last time in her rosy illusions. When she finished, I silently placed each item on the glass table with small, deliberate clicks. First my phone, screen open to a photo of her leather notebook. The phrase, "Maria Elena is so stupid," staring at her. Her smile faltered. Then the ultrasound printout, 12 weeks and 4 days clearly visible. She began panting, eyes fixed on the numbers, milk trembling in her glass. Finally, the printed NIPT result, the 20% conclusions circled in red. I slowly pushed it toward her. Camilla stared, her eyes widened. Panic took over, she could no longer pretend. Crash, the glass of milk fell, spilling across the expensive Persian carpet like a dirty white stain. You were spying on me," she stammered, voice breaking. But fear lasted only seconds. Realizing the mask was useless, her true face emerged. She burst into sharp, mocking laughter. "Fine, now that you know, I don't have to pretend anymore." She stood abruptly, body trembling with rage, pointing at me. "Yes, the baby isn't your stupid son. It belongs to your husband Archero." Then, voice full of defiance. "What will you do now? Tell Mauricio his father slept with his wife. Tell the world and watch your perfect family fall apart in scandal and humiliation." I remained seated, back straight, hands on the armrests, looking at her not with anger but pity. I took a slow sip of chamomile tea. Archero confessed everything to me long ago, Camilla, every detail. Seeing her surprise, I set the cup down and continued calmly. "But there is something very important you seem to have forgotten." I looked her straight in the eyes. "Look again at the result. This baby is Archero, either." I paused, letting the words sink in. "While you were busy deceiving both father and son, you apparently lost track of who you actually slept with and when. Maybe it's time you start looking for the real father of your child." My words landed like a final, merciless hammer. Camilla's haughty expression shattered. She froze, then slumped onto the sofa like a puppet with cut strings, eyes empty, staring at the spreading milk stain. After that confrontation, she dragged herself to her room like a lost soul. No arrogance left, only the crooked silhouette of a defeated woman. I didn't waste another breath on her. I fetched a rag and bucket and knelt to clean the milk myself. That dirty white stain, like a stain on my family's history, had to be erased by my own hands. The house fell into an unsettling silence. I brewed another pot of chamomile tea, sat in the dim living room, and waited for my son. Almost midnight, I heard the familiar engine. Archero returned first. He saw me sitting alone in the dark, expression cold and firm. He understood everything was over. "Did you talk to her?" he asked in a tired, fearful voice. I only nodded. He sighed heavily, sat in a distant armchair, head down, hands clasped. We remained like shadows separated by an abyss of betrayal. The next morning, before calling Mauricio, I phoned Margarita, my best friend since university, now one of the city's toughest family lawyers. I told her everything, crying at last. She listened silently, then said only, "Elena, you've endured enough. Send me all the evidence. I'll come this afternoon." Having a trusted professional take the weight felt like partial relief. That afternoon, Mauricio returned in high spirits, radiant about a new contract. Seeing his pure smile broke my heart. How could I extinguish that light? But I had to. I invited him to the table where I had prepared aromatic tea. Archero was present, forced to be the defendant awaiting sentence. Camilla had locked herself in her room since the night before. I spoke firmly, hiding my inner trembling. "Mauricio, sit down. There's something very important about Camilla and our family." One by one, I showed him everything. The notebook photos, the ultrasound, the DNA results. I told him the whole journey, from Lucia's whisper in the clinic to Archero's confession, omitting the part where he helped get Mauricio drunk. I couldn't hurt him more, up to the confrontation with Camilla. Mauricio listened, face shifting from surprise to confusion to shock. When he saw the 20% results underlined in red, his eyes clouded. The truth hit like a tsunami. He didn't scream or break anything. He simply stared into space as if his soul had fled. Then he dropped his head onto the table, shoulders shaking, and wept, bitter, heartbreaking sobs of despair. It was the cry of a world collapsing. The first time I had heard my son cry like that since he was a child and fell off his bicycle. "I fell in love with the wrong person," he sobbed. "I trusted her, I was so stupid." His pain pierced me like 1,000 needles. I knelt and hugged him tightly while his back trembled. Archero tried to approach. I stopped him with a raised hand. At that moment, my son needed only me. I pressed him to my chest and whispered the words only a mother can say. "It was never your fault, Mauricio. The fault belongs to those who knew you were good and took advantage." The next day, Margarita arrived, not as a friend, but as a sharp lawyer with documents ready. Mauricio, eyes still swollen but now cold and determined, signed the divorce papers without a second's hesitation. Camilla was forced to leave the house within 24 hours under a temporary restraining order. Her angel mask finally cracked completely. She screamed, insulted, cursed, threatened to spread rumors and destroy the Castaneda name. But with irrefutable evidence presented by Margarita, her threats were useless barks from a cornered dog. Margarita, representing our family, sued Camilla for fraud, attempted appropriation of assets through marriage, threats, and defamation. The trial was swift. With the notebook, DNA results, and Archero's testimony, she had no defense. She was sentenced to 2 years, probation, prohibited from approaching any Castaneda for 5 years, and upon birth the baby would be placed in the care of its maternal grandmother, the court deeming Camilla lacking the emotional stability and moral integrity to be a mother. Camilla vanished from our lives as quickly as she had entered, leaving only ashes. The following months were heavy. The house became too large and empty. Mauricio locked himself in his study. Day and night, I heard only the frantic typing, as if writing were his escape from reality. Archero and I shared the same bed, but with an invisible void between us. His betrayal, especially drugging his own son, left a wound too deep. I didn't know if I could ever forgive. One night on the porch, Archero brought me chamomile tea and stood at a distance. "Elena," he said hoarsely, "I know asking forgiveness now is meaningless. I only want you to know I will dedicate the rest of my life to making amends to you and Mauricio." It wasn't an empty promise. It was the first step. We began speaking again, not with passionate words of old love, but with small, everyday efforts. A meal he cooked clumsily, a flower pot on the windowsill, a slight nod in the morning. Healing takes time, like curing a deep wound. 6 months later, on a sunny afternoon, Mauricio's study door opened. He emerged thinner but clear-eyed, holding a thick manuscript titled *The Room of Silence*. The novel, born from deepest wounds, sleepless nights, and silent tears, became a publishing phenomenon. Not just a thrilling detective story, but a profound psychological exploration of trust, betrayal, and the healing power of truth. Mauricio transformed pain into art. Little by little, he smiled again, met friends, traveled, and lived with new strength and maturity. Now every morning I make coffee and sit at the kitchen table. I no longer feel nauseous. I watch the golden sunbeams caress my newly planted cacti, thorny and rough, yet rising strongly under the sun, just like my family. I hear the constant typing from Mauricio's office, no longer the sound of escape, but the heartbeat of life, creation, rebirth. The storm has passed. We bear scars that will never erase, but we survived. Archero and I are learning to walk forward together. Mauricio has found his path. And in the sky after the storm, a new dawn, peaceful and warm, begins to appear. Now, sitting alone on the porch, watching the last rays of sun slip between the branches, I understand that life is not always governed by logic or love. Sometimes those we trust most strike the hardest. But I've also learned that truth, however painful, is the most powerful tool for justice and recovery. I am no longer the naive woman of yesterday. I have become a mother who knows how to rise from ruins, fight for her son, and protect what remains. This story is a reminder. Peace does not come from closing our eyes, but from daring to face the truth, no matter how much it devastates the soul. As long as we have the courage to move forward with love and justice in our hearts, losses can be transformed into strength to begin again. The names and places in this story have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. We share it not to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and reflect. How many mothers suffer in silence inside their own homes? If you were in my place, what would you do? Remain silent to keep the peace, or dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion and any suggestions to make our content better. God always blesses, and I am convinced courage will lead us to brighter days. On the final screen, I'm leaving 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the end.